In a few days, I'm going to say goodbye to Winkle here, my 1983 300 SD. It's going on a long cross-country trip to Wisconsin. And I've got all my old diesels out here. You know, this may be the end of the line. Remember, it was a W123 over 25 years ago that started all this for me. And there they are. These are probably the most desirable of the older Mercedes diesel cars. This is a 1983 300 SD, that's a 1985 300 TD wagon, that's a 1983 turbo sedan, that's a 1983, last year in the USA, 240D, and right over there is the gold 83 300D turbo. Isn't that interesting? I've got 4 cars here that are all 1983, and that was a pretty good year for Mercedes-Benz. You know, I got this car, it was in pretty nice condition, but you can't believe the amount of work I've had to do to it. We're talking suspension work, a steering box, all new brakes, new tires, shocks, and then I had to fix the door locks, had to fix the sunroof, had to fix the power windows, and on it goes. And that's kind of the same with a number of these cars. You know, I have this multi-phase checklist that I use. People say these diesels will go a million miles, and I don't agree with it if they're not maintained properly. And I would say most of these that I see now are not maintained properly. Can you believe it? Every one of these 5 cars have had to get a complete new brake system. The brakes, the calipers are dragging, you know, the bearings were bad. The wagon I just acquired, you know, about a month ago, and it's going to need a replacement transmission. The number one thing is the engine. The quality of the engine. That's the most important thing when you get one of these old diesels. Next to rust. I mean, if I get one that has a good engine with a lot of rust in it, I just save the engine. All 5 of these cars have had their engines replaced. In fact, 3 of them have had factory remanufactured engines put in the cars at some time in their life. That's the 300 SD here, and the 2 300D turbo sedans have had replacement engines. You can tell that by the ridgeline on top of the valve cover. The wagons had a replacement used engine, and so has the 240D. The engine had been rebuilt shortly before the guy wrecked the car, and that's where that engine came from. So I start with a good engine, and the next thing I do is the brakes. The brakes is number 2, and then it's on to suspension and all those little things that need fixing. As a tribute to these old diesel engines, I'm going to fire each one of these up and let you hear it run. You know, there are many who believe that these are some of the best automobile engines ever made, and they have a very unique sound. I don't think there is any engine anywhere in the world that was ever produced that sounds like one of these OM616 or OM617 diesel engines. And the turbo engine that you see here has a really unique sound. And you're going to get to hear that in a minute if you haven't been around these. I know some of you are chuckling and say, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can hear these block or 2 blocks away coming down the road, and I can recognize it as an old Mercedes diesel engine. And you can see right here what I was talking about. This ridge line indicates this is a factory remanufactured engine that was replaced at some time in this car's life. So it's a very strong engine, very nice running engine. I'm just going to reach in through the door and fire this thing up. We'll let you listen to it at idle because that is where it has its really unique sound, and then I'm going to run it up so you can hear it at speed. That clank, 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 clank. That little clattering noise is what you will recognize as so unique. I know some people have said, oh, I pull into this service station and some guy comes up and says, hey, I think there's something wrong with your engine, it's got a rod knot. Well, let me bring it up to speed and you can see how the sound changes. Next up is the engine in my 1985 300 TD wagon. I haven't named this Mercedes yet. It's a recent acquisition. And you'll see a number of different changes in the 1985 models. I'm not going to go over these now. I'll probably do a separate video on that. But those of you who are familiar with these diesels, you'll know that the 85s are kind of unique. Now I'm going to reach in the car again and just fire this thing up with a real short glow. Now this one sounds very similar to the 300 SD. You can hear that distinct rattle of the engine at idle. And now I'm going to bring it up off speed and listen how smooth this engine runs. And I'm looking in the back, and this thing doesn't produce any smoke at all. This is a replacement used engine because the owner lost an oil cooler hose, and that destroyed the original engine in this wagon. This is the engine in Green Go. This is my 1983, just one of them, 300D turbo sedan. You're probably wondering why I call it Green Go. One thing, it's a very unique green color, and the other thing, this thing really goes. This is probably the fastest turbo diesel sedan of this era that I've ever driven. I mean, it actually throws you back in the seat, which is quite unusual for an old diesel. So I'm going to start this one up, and you're going to notice a little bit different sound. This engine has a little bit more of a bark to it. You'll hear it if you listen closely and go back and listen to the previous one. But I think that's probably the reason it's so fast. It has the highest compression of all these engines, well over 400 pounds per cylinder, and that's probably the reason it's fast, and it's the reason why it has this unique sound at idle. Notice how quickly it fires up too. Can you hear the difference? Now once I bring it off idle, it'll sound very similar to the previous engine. But that's the sound of healthy ignition knock, okay? That's not metal on metal knocking inside the engine. That's the sound of a very healthy ignition fire knock sound that these OM617 turbo diesels produce when they're healthy. Let me show you how well Blueberry's engine starts up and runs. I'm just going to start it without even getting into the car. I'll reach in here and just go up for a few seconds. And it just fires right up. Come over here and we'll show you how this baby purrs. That's the sound of a healthy 640D engine. And finally, I want you to listen to the engine in my other 1983 300D sedan, and that's Bubbles, one of my favorites. This is also a very strong engine. It comes right alongside old Green Go in terms of output power and acceleration. But listen to this baby run. See, it's got a very similar sound to Green Go in terms of the injector noise at idle. You're probably picking up a little bit of squeaking noise. That's going to be the V-belts which need replacing. But watch this thing come off idle. So I'm sure that all you diesel owners out there will find this video like music to your ears.